So, over the last couple of days, the United States, people in the military establishment have been taking credit for providing the intelligence and assistance to the Ukraine forces to kill Russian generals. And they've also taken credit for having provided intelligence and even weaponry to sink the Russian ship, the Moskva, which is the flagship of the Russians in the Black Sea. Now, the Russians have neither confirmed nor denied that the ship was hit by a missile. But that's not important. That's not the issue of this video. This video, I don't care about the Russians, or even the Ukrainians for that matter. What I care about is why is it that the United States is doing something so incredibly stupid as taking credit for military action against Russia? You see, at this time, the United States is not at war with Russia. It's engaged in a proxy war, and pretty much everybody now is admitting to the fact. Something that I keep insisting, I keep going back to this fact, something that 6-8 weeks ago, if I said it, I'd get deplatformed, and now it's, the conventional wisdom. It's just so aggravating that when you're ahead of the curve, you get deplatformed. And then when it becomes conventional wisdom and everybody's forgotten that you were ahead of the curve, they just say oh, la-di-da, everybody knows this. Nobody knew this or nobody talked about this 6-8 weeks ago, that the conflict in Ukraine was a proxy war between the United States and Russia. Now everybody is. And because of this admission, a lot of people, it seems, in the American military-industrial complex are starting to take credit for things that, quite frankly, you have to ask yourself, number one, why are they doing this and exposing themselves to retribution from the Russians, or at least a little note there in their scorebook, insofar as the Russians knowing that they're going to have to give some payback at some future time, right? Why are they doing this? Number one, and number two, why are they so egomaniacal as to need to do this, to take credit for things that quite probably they didn't have much to do with? I mean, let me give you an example. You all know that I'm from Chile, and in 2010, we had this mining disaster that trapped 33 miners underground in the north of Chile. And it became a huge international thing, because these miners were trapped there. They were alive, but they didn't have any food or water. It was a big mess. And, eventually these miners were rescued after I forgot how many days, and, the world moved on. But during the time of the rescue, I remember this very, very clearly. I was following the news incessantly, not just of the rescue, but the international news at that time. And the Americans kept trying to stick their nose into it and to make it about them. See, the miners were Chilean. The people pulling them out were Chilean, and yet the Americans kept trying to position themselves so it was about them and how they were going to save the day. It got to a point that was so ridiculous that at one point the group of engineers that were led by a Chilean guy and comprised almost exclusively of Chileans and a couple of Canadians for some reason. Anyway, they needed some drill bit, okay, some drill bit that was manufactured in, I think it was Washington or Oregon, in the Pacific Northwest. And so they ordered it. And this became a big deal in American media at the time, man. I remember they kept going on and how America was essential to save these miners. And it was some drill bit, and it wasn't even the main drill bit to get to the miners and get them out. It was some communications thing. I forgot. It's not really important. It wasn't that essential, is my point. And yet the Americans kept insisting, trying to wedge their way into the drama to make it about them, to make it about America. The United States, for the longest time, acts as if it is the belly button of the world, that everything revolves around it. I mean, they even have a phrase, the United States is the indispensable nation. The indispensable nation. I mean, think about it. Think how arrogant and conceited that phrase is. I mean, imagine if I were to walk around and say, I am the indispensable YouTuber. I mean, people would just laugh in my face, and I know I just created a meme, but fuck it. It's funny. I mean, because that kind of arrogance and self-centeredness is funny. I mean, it's incredibly funny. Mm. But it's not really that funny when it's grown-ups doing it, and it's certainly not funny when it's a major power doing it. And so let's take apart this whole indispensable nation trope that the Americans bandy about. Why is the United States the indispensable nation? I mean, does it produce something so essential that if the rest of the world doesn't get it, people in the rest of the world will die? I mean, some product, some substance perhaps, or some service that the rest of the world needs so badly that without it, everybody in the rest of the world will die. Is there such a thing coming out of the United States? Some magic powder or some I mean, anything, tell me. Huh? Because from the United States, well, there's nothing technological coming out of the United States because the United States doesn't manufacture anything. Yeah, it outsourced all of its manufacturing base to other countries. China, Vietnam, Central America, everywhere else. There's nothing that's being manufactured in the States except bullshit, except, these McKinsey type, corporate consulting kind of things. That they export by the bushel load. But that's all bullshit. They don't actually export anything useful. They barely build cars in the United States, and that used to be the big thing. The rest of the world builds cars, and they're hunky-dory, quite frankly. And if American car manufacturers, the ones that are actually built in the United States, vanished, no problem. And in fact, if all the American car companies, including Tesla, all of a sudden vanish, no problem. There are going to be cars around the world, no problem. And you start looking at what America exports, and you realize that there's only two things that they export. Two things. Weapons and Hollywood fantasies. That's all the United States exports. That's the only thing that is kind of like essential that the Americans give to the rest of the world. And, the Hollywood fantasies are just so much fantasy, and they're not even good anymore. I mean, they used to be good, but now it's just garbage. And American weapons, ask the Ukrainians who have used the javelin if they think that American weapons are so good. Ask them what they think of the Stinger missile. I don't think that they're going to give you what you think you're going to get. Because it's garbage. The F-35, $1 trillion in development, and it still doesn't fly properly. It still doesn't have its software. It's software, man. And Americans are supposed to be so great at software and tech, right? The United States doesn't export anything that is of any real value in the rest of the world. And anything that you think is like essential, other countries make it. And in some cases, they make it better. The United States doesn't export anything, and the fact that it has $100 billion per month trade deficit kind of tells you that. It doesn't export food. It doesn't export energy commodities. It doesn't export any manufactured goods. Just weapons and Hollywood bullshit. That's the indispensable nation. And yet, the United States is so conceited that it keeps insisting that, it's the belly button of the world, the most important, the indispensable nation. I would argue that the United States is indispensable for chaos in the rest of the world. I would argue that the United States is indispensable for lies being spread around the world. I would not say that the United States is indispensable for anything else. In fact, I think I can argue quite confidently that if the United States all of a sudden just vanished, just the whole continental United States plus Alaska just poof, just gone, and all of a sudden there's just ocean there where it used to be, I think the rest of the world would not only get along very well and very nicely and not even realize the disappearance of America, I think that they would be happier. Really.